A lot of Seahawks news to cover from this past week. First off, Tyler Lockett was cut to free up cap space. DK Metcalf immediately requests a trade. This is coming after Klint Kubiak was hired as the offensive coordinator back in January. Geno Smith then traded to the Raiders. There's a ton to get through. It's going to be a completely new look Seahawks team next year. What are your initial takeaways just from this past week?
The initial takeaways is that Macdonald is going to make this his team. It seems like you're getting rid of a lot of the old guard. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit surprised at the Geno Smith trade. Not just because the fact that they traded him away. I really thought that Geno was going to stay in Seattle. And I think whether you loved Geno or you hated Geno, I think we're kind of two people like that rarely sat kind of in the middle and understood what the deal with Geno was. Uh, he was a good quarterback for Seattle. He lived up to what you needed out of him, right? And there was probably a ceiling on Geno, but his ceiling wasn't the main issue with this football team. Like whenever Geno had his issues, yes, of course, Geno's a quarterback. People make mistakes. He's not a perfect person. There were throws that he had, especially in the red zone, turnovers in the red zone, that there were multiple times this year where it's like, hey, that's on Geno. Geno can't throw that ball. Geno can't try and fit that ball in that window. But there were also a lot of interceptions, fumbles, issues with that Seahawks team that was not Geno Smith's fault. Geno Smith was not the limiting factor. It's very clear to me that Macdonald, he'd hired Grubb. He had this offensive game plan where he was going to follow what Grubb was doing. He was cool with Grubb's plan to throw the football a lot more than we're used to seeing in Seattle. And he, after 1 year, said, no, we're not going to do that. We are going to be a football team that runs the ball. Now, I don't totally understand why Smith was traded away unless it's, hey, we're going to get Sam Darnold for sure. We want him back in a Klint Kubiak offense, someone that he's worked with in the past. But I really would have thought you would have got more for Geno. I would not have thought just a single third-round pick. Like if you're trading him for a third round, I would have thought you might have gotten like a sixth or seventh round involved later on in this draft or maybe next year. But it sounds like this is what Seattle thought they were going to get as a best offer for him, and so they jumped on it.
Yeah, and we talked all year about how it was Seattle's offensive line that was the issue.
Yep.
It's like Geno has absolutely zero time to be able to do anything. He's got to be getting the ball off immediately or trying to scramble. That also led to them not being able to establish the run game as much as they'd like to. Of course, with Grubb's
Right.
play calling, it's more pass heavy to where maybe he wasn't calling the rush as much as they needed. But in the same light, you know, the offensive line is the key issue. We'll see how they can reinforce that in the draft and maybe in free agency. And part of this, they've now freed up. They have over $62 million in cap space, which on Spot Track is currently eighth in the league. So they're freeing up a lot of capital to be able to make some moves. And
Mhm.
where there's smoke, there might be fire. That's where Sam Darnold, he had a breaking out season with the Vikings
Yep.
this last year. I heard a ton of positive talk about what he was doing, but now I hear a bunch of Seahawks fans that are one side or the other. The same type of thing with Sam Darnold. What are your thoughts on the potential of Sam Darnold coming into Seattle?
Well, it's all going to be about the offensive line and how you address the offensive line. I think that move with Geno and the reports are they were talking contract extensions with Geno. Geno was asking for more money than they were comfortable with. I believe the number was
40 to
around
45 million.
I was going to say it was around 40 million. I wouldn't pay Geno that amount of money. So then you're kind of banking that Sam Darnold is going to be lower than that number. I don't know if it's better at 35 with Sam Darnold than Smith at 40, but maybe at 35 that gives you an extra 5 million to play with to go get different offensive linemen. But that's going to be the most important. Like if you look at the last two games of this season for Minnesota, that's what happens to Sam Darnold when he's under pressure. He becomes a mortal quarterback. And I mean, it's not fair. He was set up for failure when he was in New York, but there is a reason why the I was seeing ghosts out there clip has lived on forever with him. He is scared of pressure. And that's not his fault. Most quarterbacks are. The truly great ones are the crazy ones that'll stand in there and they don't care about pressure getting in their face. But I mean, even in the Super Bowl, you're watching the greatest, second greatest, third greatest, wherever you rank him in your top quarterback Mount Rushmore, but he's definitely on that Mount Rushmore. And Patrick Mahomes, you saw how he turned mortal when he gets a pass rush in his face. As great as Patrick Mahomes is, he turned mortal in that Super Bowl because the Eagles and Sweat and Carter, they were all over him all game long. So Seattle has to find a way to revamp that offensive line, specifically in the interior. And I think the other thing that Seattle has to do really is get that run game going. Like, a lot of people were frustrated with how Pete Carroll called the football game. And I can listen to people who want to come in here and say, I don't like the way that Pete Carroll offenses ran the ball on first and second down. Like, it always felt like, hey, you're going to run first, second down. I can listen to people who are upset about the schemes in how he ran the football. It was very vanilla, right? Pete was we're going to do a few things, but we're going to do those few things great. There weren't a whole lot of smoke and mirrors. You were lining up and you were playing football, and he trusted his guys were better than your guys, and they were going to make better plays than your guys, and they were going to be more competitive than your guys. And I can listen to those conversations, but I do think the philosophy in how Pete attacked everything in being a run first philosophy and the play action pass off of it, I think that's the best game plan for success in the NFL because it leads to a balanced offense. And with Grubb's offense, as exciting as it was, especially early, it wasn't balanced. And it led to a lot of teams being able to dial up pressures and get after Geno and get after that offensive line. So I would like to see, I think when you free up that much space, that tells me you are going to make moves in free agency for established offensive linemen. Schneider has kind of proven, aside from Cross, and I'm going to give a half point for Lucas, because when Abraham Lucas is healthy, that dude is an awesome right tackle in the NFL. The problem is he's had a lot of injury issues, right? And so
Mhm.
that's why I only give him a half point. When he's healthy, he's great. But I feel like he's been in the league for 3 years now, and he's probably played in half the games in that time that he could have been available for. And it's not his fault. He's hurt. That's not on him, right? Injuries happen. It's an unlucky, unfortunate type of deal. But if it kind of seems like Schneider has missed on that interior offensive line. So go pay for it in free agency then, right? Go try and sign a free agent guard, maybe even overpay a little bit for him. I'm okay with that. When you won your Super Bowl, you had the most expensive offensive line in the NFL. So go get those offensive linemen. Because if you make the move to Sam Darnold and you don't address that offensive line, then all of this was worthless.
Could be a lot of the same issue that we saw from the past year if they have no time to react and no time to actually set up the run game. Part
Right.
of it also with the transferring quarterback might be, Sam Darnold is going to be 27, 28 years old. Geno Smith was 34. If he's looking for
Yep.
a 3-year extension to go through year 37, that's getting up there and that's paying a lot of money for an older quarterback. The other part of it that happened, Tyler Lockett was released. He spent a decade with this team. He was a key piece. I mean, we kind of saw that it was getting towards the end there. Richard Sherman, I don't know if you saw it, but he came out with comments of how Seattle has a tendency to cut their guys that they built in house and that have been loyal to the team. And he's stressing loyalty and that they should have kept Tyler and X, Y, and Z. What are your thoughts on some of that mindset?
It's not college sports. Like, loyalty, even in college sports now with the transfer
Oh,
portal,
there's no
and
loyalty anymore.
there's no loyalty. Like, I don't mean to be a jerk to Richard because I love Richard. Like, I think Richard is one of my favorite Seahawks of all time, if not my favorite. Like, I think he's very funny. I loved how he brought a certain swagger and attitude to Seattle, but he of all people should know that that's kind of like a pipe dream now. That's kind of a utopian like look on it where it like, okay, cool. John Schneider and Macdonald, they let Tyler Lockett stay in Seattle. Well, if they go 4-4 or 4-12 or whatever, 4-13 the next couple of years, they're fired. Like, cool, you kept Tyler, but they're fired. I listened to Sean McVay do an interview the other day with Pardon My Takes podcast, and he goes, no one wants to keep Cooper Kupp more than I do. Like, he made me a better person. I drafted him when I got the job as a 30-year-old head coach in the NFL. I love Cooper Kupp. But the best thing for the team, the best thing for the collective is to move on from Cooper Kupp. And I think Tyler Lockett knows that. And I think he understands that. And Richard understands that, right? And Bobby understands that. And most sane people who understand the business or truly get removed from the business and have time in between understand that it's a business decision, not a personal decision. And there's still time for Tyler to come back, sign a one-day contract, retire as a Seahawk. There's still time for Bobby to do that if they so choose to. If they choose not to, that's fine as well. But you get to a certain point where if you are doing everything just for the players, then it's player service and fan service. It's a business nowadays, and it has to be treated like that. But that's also why I don't crucify players for going out, having a good year on a contract that they just signed, and then saying, "Hey, no, 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 we're gonna fix some stuff here. Like you're either gonna make more of this guaranteed right now, or I need a new contract extension." I don't begrudge DK Metcalf at all, right? DK Metcalf, I feel like, has performed or slightly outperformed the contract that he has right now. And I know we're going to get into it more in the future, but I get why he's coming out and saying, "Hey, I deserve more money," because you have a finite window of making money, especially in the NFL. And unfortunately for Tyler Lockett, you're at the end, man. You're a third wide receiver, fourth wide receiver. It makes more sense for Seattle to move on with like a Bobo, or go in and get a Chenault type, or try and find the
JSN's
next Tyler
legit.
Lockett. Right, JSN's legit. But when we're talking about that third or fourth wide receiver, it makes more sense to go get someone cheap. It makes more sense to go into the draft for him, because at this point in Lockett's career, it's only going to be steps backwards. It's not going to be steps forward. I want him to retire a Seahawk as much as anybody. But am I going to crucify the Seahawks for this move? No, absolutely not. It's a business move. This isn't a personal thing. And you can't compare it to your job. You know why? Because your job doesn't equate to what pro football is. There's
Right.
no job that you can equate to professional sports, because there isn't that one-to-one comparison. It's always going to be apples and oranges. So it's unfortunate. I really do hope, though, that Tyler comes back and does a one-day type of a deal. I hope that Bobby does it. And if they choose not to, then unfortunately they choose not to.
Yeah, and John Snyder was on Seattle Sports 710 with another interview. He's got a weekly or biweekly interview with them, and he was talking about how it was frustrating how, they had a specific date that they were going to be releasing Tyler Lockett, and they wanted to give him his flowers and show him all the due respect for his time in Seattle. But then the news with DK Metcalf leaked the same day, so it basically took away all of the flash
Right.
from that day for Tyler Lockett. So he expressed his frustration how it came out. In the same light, he did mention that DK Metcalf has been extremely good to work with, and
Mhm.
he's a business guy himself. He's got a lot of brand deals. So it's like he's been very respectful throughout the process, and DK also understands that Schneider is going to do what's best for the franchise first, and then what is best for DK second, because he needs to
Mhm.
look after the franchise. It sounds like they're targeting a first and a third round pick for DK. What are your thoughts on the valuation of that?
Yeah, after the Geno Smith trade, I kind of don't understand where his price will be. I would love a first and a third for DK. There was talk, when hey, he might get traded over to Green Bay. There was some of the Seahawks beat writers that were talking about that, and it was going to be a second and Romeo Dobbs for DK, so a younger wide receiver, and you'd have that second round pick. For me personally, I still think DK's what, 27, 28 years old. He's still in that peak range. If you sign him for 3 or 4. Maybe you're able to work out an extension, or maybe you give him an extra year that most teams might not give him, so that he will stay with the team. Because I do think that his skill set mixed with JSN's skill set is going to be the best for DK. It's going to be the best for JSN, and it's going to be the best for the Seahawks as a whole. Like where you saw Tyler Lockett really explode is when DK Metcalf comes into the fold as a young receiver. He's a bigger receiver. He's a deep play threat. It forces safeties to move over across the field to make sure that they can be there to help cover him. Well, that opens things up in the middle. And so obviously, I think this year really highlighted the fact of JSN is now moving into that Tyler Lockett role. DK is, still staying in his role. But because of that mix, now you've got the slot guy, you got the big wide receiver on the outside. Um, I know there's a lot of talk right now in don't pay the wide receiver, because you can go get another wide receiver in the draft and he's going to be cheaper. And I do think that there is I don't want to say a devaluing of the wide receiver position, but it does feel like you can go into the draft and find a wide receiver that's going to be 80% of DK Metcalf if you're able to hit. Where I'm always going to warn you on that, though, is Quentin Johnson, right? Quentin Johnson was a huge deep play threat, big, tall, strong, physical receiver coming out of TCU. As soon as the Chargers drafted him, it was, hey, this guy is a dude. He's can't miss. He's going to be great. He's been fine. He hasn't been great. And there were conversations about him being cut after fall camp this year or being traded away because he couldn't catch the dang football. Now it does feel like Harbaugh and, Justin Herbert and that whole crew over there, they've kind of helped alleviate some of his issues. But I just want to remind everyone, just because they have potential to be a top wide receiver doesn't mean they're going to be. Remember, DK Metcalf was a second, third round pick. And so people always go into it being like, well, DK was a day two guy. We could just find another DK. Well, you know who was ranked higher than DK but had the same skill set? N'Keal Harry. N'Keal Harry is completely out of the league nowadays. A similar wide receiver, Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool isn't around anymore. Jalen Reagor was drafted before Justin Jefferson. Now, you can have an argument about, hey, the scouting department did a bad job. They should have been higher on Justin Jefferson than Jalen Reagor. Jalen Reagor still got taken. He got taken in front of Justin Jefferson. So you are putting faith in your front office to go in and find the right guy that fits the same mold so that you can continue to build. Now, if you're able to trade DK Metcalf for a more established wide receiver that fits a similar role or fits a similar build, I might be more willing to jump on that, take a little bit less in that trade if you're getting a younger version of him. But you're not that far off. You're the only 10-win team ever since they added the game to the regular season to not make the playoffs. I think what DK Metcalf and his crew is doing is they're using this as a bargaining chip. I think Seattle and DK sit down and they get close to a deal. I really do, because I think it's the best thing for everyone. And I also think that Schneider can really play hardball here with DK and say, hey, man, it's not the NBA. I can trade you where I want to trade you, and no one's going to say anything about it. So if, the Carolina Panthers give me the best trade option for you, you're going to go to Carolina and there's nothing you can do about it. And so maybe there's a different conversation afterwards. I mean, we literally just started taping. If you would have asked me an hour ago, I would have said, well, Myles Garrett, he's definitely out of Cleveland. He's not going to stay there. Why would he stay there? He wants to play for a contender. He wants to win a Super Bowl. He's only got a couple good years left. He just signed like a $40 million a year deal, right? For 3 or 4 years. Myles Garrett, just right now. It was basically clear that he was done. He said he'd never come back to Cleveland, and he just signed a deal. So with a lot of these things, pump the brakes until the trades are made.
There's a price point for everyone. And like he came out of DK's camp that he ideally is traded to a contender. Yeah, well, everyone wants to be on a contender, but like you mentioned, it's not really up to him. It's a Seahawks first decision, what's going to be best for them. Now transitioning a bit into Klint Kubiak, he was hired as the offensive coordinator back in January, and kind of what to expect from him. He actually played as a safety, I believe, at Colorado State back in college. He then became a graduate assistant on the offensive side shortly after. Most recently, he was the Minnesota Vikings offensive coordinator in 2021. He was also the New Orleans Saints offensive coordinator in 2024. And from what I've read up on Kubiak so far, he's going to bring a much more balanced style of offense. His schemes focused on balance, physical approach, emphasizing the run game and utilizing tight ends. He prefers 21 and 12 personnel groupings, suggesting a strategy that involves multiple tight ends, including fullbacks. What are your thoughts on Klint Kubiak coming in and what he can bring?
It's clear that Macdonald is moving away from Grubb's pass-happy offense, and there's a lot of an attack right now on Grubb, and I get some of the criticisms about it, but I think a lot of people, when a season doesn't go exactly what you want it to do or how you want it to go, let's find the scapegoat. And so some people it's Geno Smith, and some people it's the offensive line, and some people it's Ryan Grubb. And at the same point, I look back at the season and I go, you had a clear hole in the offensive line. I don't believe that it was Geno Smith's fault, right? But I do feel like Geno has certain limitations. And I felt like Grubb did not call it good offense, right? I felt like it was too college based. It was too pass happy. They did not get the running backs involved as much as they should have been, especially when you have running backs like Charbonnet, like K9. Those guys need to have the ball in their hands, and you need to be between the two of them getting 30 touches. And that doesn't necessarily have to be in running the football, but you do need to find a way to get them, 12 runs and 3 or 4 catches, right? That would be the ideal way to use both of them. And then the most important part about that is when you do give them, 12 to 18 runs a game for each running back, that allows you then to mirror it up with the play action pass. If you run, 4 counter rights in a row, you can run a fake counter right, play action pass, flood concept, whatever. Well, if you're running the football well, those linebackers bite up on that. Now there's more room, there's more throwing options, ability. And the most important thing, it stops teams from being able to have run blitzes coming after you. That all said, you had 10 wins. Like you were 10-7.
Right.
You missed out on the playoffs because of opponent win percentage. Like you were right there. And here's the other thing. If you just finish in the first game against the Rams, you're in the playoffs. If you beat the Giants, a team that after you lost to them didn't have a lead again until Thanksgiving, you played them in September. If you just take care of business in that football game, you're fine. You're in the playoffs. Like for all the issues that Seattle had, I do feel like when I go on X right now, everyone's like, the sky is falling. The aliens are here. Like they are taking over. No, no. You have some big holes you have to fix. But right now, after how bad that defense looked at the start of the year to what it looked like at the end of the year and all the changes Macdonald made, I kind of trust that guy. John Schneider, without him, like he created your first Super Bowl roster. He created the first roster in Seahawks history that went to back Super Bowls. He created and helped find the players. I shouldn't say created. He helped find the players to fit the scheme that Pete wanted to create the best defense of the 21st century in the Legion of Boom. That's what he did.
Mhm.
So you have to trust that at some point, Schneider still knows what he's doing, knows what he's talking about. You have the right scouts in the building to find, players that are in the NFL that are going to be free agents, to find the right guys in the draft, to build this thing the right way and make the playoffs. You're right there. So the sky isn't falling. I'm excited with Kubiak because what I believe the next step for this offense is mirroring the run game and the pass game. If you mirror the run game with the pass game, it sets things up easier for both because defenses are going to look at a formation or a personnel grouping and they're not going to be able to pick certain tendencies because you might line up, let's say you line up in a double tight formation, one back in the backfield, you got a quarterback under center. Everything is open in your playbook. You could run the football. You could straight drop back and throw the football. You could play action pass out of it. You could screen. You could screen to a wide receiver. You could screen to a tight end. There are so many different things that you could do where it felt like at the end of the season, Seattle had basically tipped all their tendencies. So teams, hey, they're in a pistol formation right now. We're going to bring a blitz from the field because they're going to slide to the boundary with their offensive line. And so there are things that I hope and I believe Kubiak will do to help make life easier on that team, easier on the offensive line, easier on the quarterback, whoever that may be, easier on the running backs. So we'll see what goes. If they can mirror that offense better, go get a couple good guards in free agency. Like, don't be shocked if this Seahawks team is a playoff team. Don't be shocked if they win the West. Yeah, the Rams are going to be good, probably. Like, unless Stafford like falls off a cliff and completely loses what he's had, they're going to be good, and you're going to be battling it out with them. I think San Fran is going to take a step back. Maybe they hit in the draft. They seem to be able to do that and reload. Every time you think they're dead, they're like almost zombies and they come back. But, Arizona doesn't scare me. Don't be shocked if this Seattle team, you're in the hunt in December, not just for a wild card spot, but for a legit division title.
Yeah, that's what I was saying in a group chat. It's like I wouldn't be surprised, like watch them be a contender next year. I mean, I would much rather prefer them to do something like this and blow it up quick and make it happen instead of like going half in and only replacing one guy or something like that. So with the new OC coming in, it's going to be, and I've heard it compared to like Mike Macdonald run his defense. It's very physical. It's very balanced. There's a lot moving happening.
Mm.
Same thing with Kubiak's offensive philosophy with being physical, emphasizing the run, outside zone, play action pass, motions, screens, all these different things to widen out the field. So I'm excited to see what it brings. We'll keep you posted as we hear more about who the Seahawks bring in for quarterback as soon as DK is traded, all these different things. So make sure to comment below your thoughts on this news with Lockett, with DK Metcalf, with Kubiak, Geno Smith trade. A lot to talk about. So drop a comment. Make sure to subscribe to the Couch GM for more content like this. And we'll see you in the next one.